that's one of the ways that painting is a teacher for me in my life, because that kind of trust, just being there, being present, and knowing that something's going to happen that's going to be magical. I just knew every time. It's just like, so where is it going to be? You know, and I would just let the world be the leader of the process. I didn't lead the process in that way.
Now, what about, was there a role that research played in what you were doing?
Yes, absolutely. So some more in more projects than in others. And so there are projects where it's more about, so I'm thinking now about two bodies of figurative work from the last few years before the Bog Show. Because I do these direct turnarounds. I think this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, because it's time I settle down. And then I go, okay, I did that. And I'm over here. So that's a bit frustrating for me, but it's just the way it is. So the figurative work was an exploration of the relationship between figure and ground. So that is, I can only think about that. I can't really research it in a real way. I can only think about it. I can just allow myself to consider that question, and I mean that's a big discussion that I can get into, like everything. But I just allow, I guess this is part what I'm saying about the research, is I allow whatever I'm working on to be present for me all the time. So that
so it's really absorbing.
It's present for me all the time. So that then I'm seeing everything through that lens. And so if I'm studying crows, and I still to this day, I notice every single crow. I mean, I remember us walking and you saying, well, how come you don't notice a single man? You notice every single crow. That's why you're single. You know, so, but it's true. But, and I still don't ever miss a nest. You know, I'm working on some nest work right now, and I see all the nests as I'm driving around. I notice them in all the trees, and when I'm walking, I notice I just see them all the time, right? Yeah. And now I'm working with networks of patterning in grasses and that sort of thing. So, again, I just love it. I see it. So if I'm doing something of a more, some things are very research driven. So I did the butterfly work. Went to Costa Rica and worked on a butterfly farm. You know, I have never really even done that work. I've never finished that work. I've got all this exquisite material and ideas and some video material and everything. I've never actually done that body of work. Right. You know, so that's true too. You know, I've got video projects unedited, and you know, I mean, I'm not short of ideas. But so, I mean, to get back to your question, there's kind of the inspiration, there's this kind of fascination which would involve research. A lot of writing often, not always. And then, sometimes a consultative process. You know, I've worked with, I've done a lot of collaborations, so then it's letting other people in at some stage, you know, so letting in the poet or the scientist or the cinematographer into your process. And so there's that kind of consultative, letting other influences in. That was a big learning for me. And letting that takes time, because then letting that influence settle and filter and, you know, then reinvent what you're doing. Although working with a cinematographer is interesting because, you know, I work with Rudy Kavanek, and he's looking through with his very good eye through the camera making decisions, and I'm saying, yeah, and I want this, make sure you, and he's like, just a minute, and I'm just like, you know, so there's what he's seeing and what I'm seeing, and the space that comes between. I don't know if there's other stages in between that I'm not thinking of. There might be, but I want to leap to then the making, because the making, there's something very consistent that happens that is, I think, consistent with probably every creative person's work, I would bet, which is, I think of it as when imagination or what's subconscious or what is immaterial or what is, it's out there in the ether, when it has to become material, when the rubber meets the road, So what I can imagine is not the same as what happens.
Right.
When the materials, that's why I think I like the idea of the material world, because that's where I encounter it with my materials, So
exactly.
So that is a very, very, very interesting thing. And I think, again, it's a big teaching, because I have lots of ideas and lots of things that go on in me about myself and but they don't always filter through into what actually works in my life. So it's the same kind of thing. What is actually so, so what are you thinking about, and what is actually so. So I find it kind of scary, very exciting, and very instructive, because it's a time when I have to surrender some of my big idea as I'm working, to let something feed back up from the materials, or I'm in a war with my work, and so somehow I have to find a dance with that it's so good for your ego, because you can't be in there saying, no, this is my big idea, because you'll miss that really beautiful part of the work, which is when the work shows you what it wants and the work becomes the work, and there is something else going on that, is not for me to say, is for me to see and observe and make way for. I've been thinking a lot about, and over the years I've thought a lot about this, and I was just teaching on Gabriola, and I talked about this. It seemed like everything we talked about, I used the same thing. That's sort of how I do things, about this gap. So in this gap is where there's so much fascinating stuff. So the gap between the imagination and the concrete, there's a gap between there, and that is great. That's where all the really rich ground is. And so that's been the sort of the one consistent thing that I can say about everything that I do. I like the gap. I mind the gap. I really do. There's that. The way I described it once, I was years ago trying to write an artist statement, and thinking, what can I say? Because I do that and that. And what is there that is consistent here? Like, who am I? What is this? And it's the one thing that was always, always there, is that I'm interested in the space between. Between.
That's where it all happens.
Yeah, space between you and I, and the space between me and my work, and the space between the work and the observer, and the space between art and science, and la 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 la. Yeah.
So what about after that really active phase where you're creating, it becomes concrete? What's the end of the process for you? Is it done when the work is done, or is
I think then you hope that you will break into kind of a flow mode where you are completely surrendered to what's going on, and man, that's why we do it. Because when you're there, when I'm in that space, I feel completely innocent. I feel like I can't do anything wrong. What could be wrong? I'm just painting. I mean, how could painting be wrong? I can't remember why there would ever be another way. It just feels like, well, of course, you're just painting. And of course, and you've been painting for 30 years. Like, it's not a big deal. You're just, what could be wrong? Yeah, what could be wrong? And I do feel that way often when I'm making work at all different stages. If I'm out in the bog and I notice some light coming through this web, and I just feel like I can forget I don't even forget, it just happens. There's no activity that happens, but my personality, my ideas, my